Good morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the We Matter Leadership Interview Series. Today, we bring to you two legendary business leaders who have been involved in multiple business transformations and are, their wisdom is unparalleled. And they need no introduction. Mr. R Gopalkrishnan, who's headed Hindustan Unilever businesses in India, and then he was executive director of Tata Sons for a very long time, who was a parent to multiple businesses in Tata Group, who owned and transformed the Tata Group brand, and was part of the whole transformation from what Tata Group was when Mr. Ratan Tata took over to what it is today. And similarly, Mr. Hrishikesh Bhattacharya is also a celebrated management professional and consultant. He's also been with levers and he's done a lot of transformation. And thereafter, he's been consulting and teaching in multiple US and Asian universities and institutes, including India. And with that, I welcome Aji, and as we always called Mr. R Gopalkrishnan when I was with Tata Strategic Management Group, and subsequently when I was with Gallup and Hewitt. We welcome Aji and Rishi to this show.
Thank you.
So, I will try and talk more or ask more, talk less and ask more about the transformation experiences and what companies in India should do for transforming their business, because with the real VUCA times that have arrived post-pandemic, the transformation seems to be becoming constant. So business landscapes have been evolving rapidly. And how do you ensure that the knowledge base remains adaptable, and how has the adaptability positively influenced your response to changing business environments?
Rishi, you want to go with that?
Okay. Yeah, so I think what happens is that change is the core of leadership. So if you look at any leaders, their primary responsibility is to manage change. And though in our own lives, the most recent thing seems to be the biggest change, change has been happening for a long time. And right from the start of our careers in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, we have seen this happening. So the question of adaptability is a very important one, because if you have to play a leadership role, and that can be from at various levels in a company, you have to know your past, and you got to get a sense of the future. And therefore, a change and adaptability really always go together.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So my next question is that, when I was at IIM Ahmedabad, on one Sunday, there was alumnus from Hindustan Levers, and that time, that time Hindustan Levers and not HUL, who was giving us a session on exports and international business. And he was quite excited, and the session extended into lunchtime, and we had a tacit understanding not to ask him any questions. And when he reached the questions and nobody was asking questions, so he said, no, this sounds like Lever's leadership meeting where you ask questions and you're not supposed to ask questions. And we then got intrigued and we said, no, why is it so? So he said, see, leadership, the Levers is a huge operations engine. And it can, and this was like, I think 91. And it is designed to execute and execute very well. And that's how we make money. And if you have too many questions, the execution is a problem, right? But I do understand that, not having questions, innovation was becoming a problem. And then Levers went through a major transformation from an operations engine to an innovation engine. How did you manage that transformation? And because it's a huge cultural shift from army-like execution to innovation, which is highly marketing and brand driven innovation.
Rishi, you want to do that or shall I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just want to share my perspective, and Rishi may want to embellish or add or even disagree. You're right. Levers was a very process-orientated, cost-conscious execution engine. It was not the basic culture of Levers, I have to add. It was forced upon Levers because of the environment in which the company was operating. We had control on imports, exports, production, price. Everything was dictated by government policy. And the only strategic option, if I may even use that word, was cut cost. And the evidence of that kind of culture permeating and indeed accounting for the success of Levers in the 70s and 80s was that people from the manufacturing side always got to the top job. It may be coincidence, but as a young officer, I could see the relevance of these people because they brought in a great degree of the industrial mindset, whether it was marketing or finance or anything, that was an overarching feeling. And it is that you're probably referring to, because when you say 1990, 91, somebody spoke to you, we were just coming out of that. And then what happened around 1991, or what made it change, was liberalization. And of course, a change in leadership, because that always helps. Sushim Datta became the chairman of the company. And I think Rishi was a part of the management committee at that time, because at that time I had gone away to Unilever Arabia. And very briefly, and Rishi can expand on it, Sushim Datta and his team, which included Rishi, called in, what's his name, the guy who died, consultant, the Bengali chap?
Shumantra
Ghoshal. And they had a powwow, at the end of which they decided that we want to double our volume. I mean, it is unheard of. In tons, I'm not talking of rupees. And we have to have a far better approach to quality. And we must be a deeply innovative company. What do we as leaders have to do to change the company? I think they started a process which probably took 7-8 years. But that's what is the trigger for the change. And it may be a coincidence that subsequent leaders happen to come from finance, marketing, and so on, rather than from manufacturing. I don't want to make an equivalence that cost control means manufacturing, innovation means marketing. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying how the times of the business and the context of the business influences leadership decisions. Rishi, you want to add anything?
No, I think that's very comprehensive.
So what were the key parameters of this transformation that helped very successful? See, the transformation, and I may be wrong, but transformation appears to be easier when companies are not doing well. I do recall, and Adi, you may correct me if I'm wrong, that I had approached Mr. Ratan Tata as TSMG on some company, and he said that, when did you get to improve Tata Motors? When Tata Motors made a loss of 400 crores. And when did you get to improve Palace when it made a loss of 80 crores? These guys are successful, they are doing well, so this is not a time to intervene. Wait for them to get a hit, and then you can perhaps look at transformation there. So, unfortunately, that company never got hit, and therefore it continues. And perhaps they were transforming internally in any case, and they didn't need TSMG. But coming back, levers was a very successful business, and in whatever they were doing, they were quite successful, and they never made losses, etc., etc. So, what does it take to transform a very successful company into a much more successful company?
Yeah, let me pick, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to pick on that. What really happens is that people waiting for crisis, waiting to have bad news, waiting to have bottom lines, getting under pressure, intrinsically is a sign of laziness. People, in my experience, have found that the most successful companies look at transformation as a way to success or greater success, rather than turnarounds where you are pulling, stuff out of trouble. Now, both Gopal and I, in our previous lives, have had to do some of that, and I especially had to do quite a bit of that at one time. But really, the impetus for transformation should be the change around you. And it is not your past, but how are you going to craft your future is the sense of transformation. And in doing that, if you are opportunity seeking, then you do well and you get success layered on success and so on. And I think what happened in India is that we were obsessed about government and about controls and so on, because it was very heavily imposed on us as a multinational. But behind that, the society in India was changing very, very dramatically. And it was happening in the 70s and 80s, not only after the so-called government liberalization of the 90s, but it was happening before that. And I think we were a little lazy in not grasping them because we were obsessed with these constraints on us. But there are parts of that period, and one that I was involved in was the launch and big success of a brand called Fair and Lovely, which was launched in the mid-70s. And what happened at that time is that we realized that women were coming out to work. They were no more confined to homes. That was the period, the first real period when women were getting more educated, and subsequently they were also coming out to work. And having to come out of the home was a need and desire to look more presentable, better groomed, beautiful, and so on and so forth. And using that societal change, we crafted this whole brand. So you can grasp opportunity in a transformative way than just waiting for problems to crop up on you.
I think the only comment I would add, Prashant, if I may, is it's fine to say when trouble comes to you, it could be because of laziness. It could be because of an event like COVID. COVID came and wound up businesses. It was not due to laziness. But there are multiple reasons why a business can get into trouble. One of them is laziness. And I think I want to clarify that lest people think that Rishi or I are passing a value judgment that every company which is in trouble is in value judgment. It could be sheer bad management, It may be excessive management, not laziness. But so I want to say that there are, in reality, companies which are lagging for whatever reason and which need to be accelerated. And there are some companies which are static and not moving, which also need to be accelerated. And what is a turnaround can be of any of these categories. What Rishi is talking about is a company that's coasting along well, like Hindustan Lever was. Even that, by looking into the future, can have a transformation which is a positive energy. So if I might put it that way, transformation can be a positive suction, or it can create a positive thrust forward. And they are slightly different, but there are principles that guide both. That's the limited point I wanted to add to what Rishi said. And I wanted to clarify, lest your listeners to this thing that every company in trouble has been deemed to be lazy, which I don't think was Rishi's intent. Am I right, Rishi?
Yeah, I express the laziness in a way that even if you are, if things are happening to you, now COVID, for example, was a troublesome thing for those 2 or 3 years, but a lot of positive things have actually emerged, both for businesses as well as for as well as for the people themselves. The employees and all of us who are working. Positive things come out of negative things very often. And your ability to think that through, to be able to grasp then and be opportunity minded rather than getting weighed down by the distress. Because that distress passed. It is, in 10 years' time, I don't know how many people will talk about COVID differently from flu. It's already becoming that. So I think if your mindset is one of how do I seek opportunities rather than how do I get excessively burdened by problems, is a way that transformative management is going to work. I don't know, Gopal, if this clarifies.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Prashant is to decide. He is the host of this.
Yes, I know.
I'm only here to ask questions. I'm not here to decide what is the right answer. So that really helps clarify a lot of issues on transformation. What are the essential elements of transformation that any CEO or CXO in today's world should keep in mind to ensure that the transformation succeeds?
Go ahead, Rishi.
No, go ahead, Gopal.
The things that are driving transformation, if I'm going to, I think, like Rishi said, I will speak on the opportunity side rather than the removal of obstacles side of mindset. It is very important to understand what are the drivers of the transformation so that you're responding to those, you're reading those signals. Technology is one aspect of change. And I don't think I need to expand on that. You just say technology and people will say AI, ML, and all those alphabets. Just like computers drove transformation several decades ago. So that's technology is one driver. The second and more subtle driver is society. Because that's more difficult to measure. On AI, you can call 5 consultants, listen to them and try to do something. On society, you're dependent on people like yourself in your past avatar to measure what's happening and tell you 10% of the people feel this, 15%, but my sample size is only 1,000, and so on and so forth. So a lot of judgment is called for. But societal change as to how consumers are changing becomes a huge driver. And the third one is, what is it that you want to get to from where you are? it's very easy to say, I want to be a 10 crore company or a 100 crore company. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what is the nature of the business you want to be in. If you want to continue to be consumer products, that's fine. You want to continue to serve people and that's your purpose, that's fine. But what do you want to be 10 years from now? You want to be the number one EV company, electric vehicles company, for example. And then you have to chart the impact of the societal changes and technology changes in taking your way forward. In the book that we have written, there is a soft aspect and there's a hard aspect. The hard aspect refers to all the stuff that I've just been mentioning. How do you see the future when it's so much easier to embrace the past? What do you do after pretending to see the future or imagining that you've seen the future? How do you track societal trends, technology trends, and how do you pepper it into the business idea? And the other part of the book is on soft aspects. And having done this, how do you carry people with you? There are many good ideas which are conceived of with the left brain, rational ideas. They speak to the mind, but they fail because they overlooked or they were too busy, didn't speak to the heart. And so there are the soft aspects of carrying people with you. So unless I'm using the word double engine without taking the trademark of the Prime Minister, you need a double engine of the hard part and the soft part going together. There are many books that describe the hard part. You read Michael Porter and people like that, you get that. There are many people who describe the soft part like John Cotter and Jim Collins and so on. I think both of us have tried to not compete with them, but try to give a different perspective by bringing a practical bias and put these two together. I think it's very, very important that leaders of transformational change not only think of what to do, but how best to get it done. What to do is an efficiency factor. How to do it is an effectiveness factor. And effectiveness and efficiency are not the same. Industrial mindsets make us think everything has to be efficient. That's really not true. Sometimes you have to go a bit round in circles in order to get to the task. Rishi, you want to add anything?
No, I think you have been again very, very comprehensive. So I have nothing to add on that. Yeah.
I just want Prashant, in our book, I'm sorry, I keep referring to the book because it's fresh in our minds, and it's not surprising that we refer to it. We have taken something in the public space, family planning in India, or the introduction of Hindi as a national language. We have not written it up as a case study. We've just made it's a narrative about those two episodes, which we saw playing out under our nose as we were growing up, and how an efficient way to introduce Hindi met with resistance, and how a Kaun Banega Crorepati, Ashok Kumar, Dilip Kumar movie achieved effectiveness. And we underestimate the impact of Kaun Banega Crorepati, Sampurna Ramayan, and Devanand running around pretty girls in trees. But those are very evocative ways in which common people can understand what you mean when you say soft part and hard part. There's nothing intellectual about it. There is intellectual stuff, but that's not what the ground we have covered. We have covered it from a pragmatic point of view.
That's so nice. Yeah, that example is a wonderful example of how the soft part can be managed. And I guess this also changed over time. I mean, the belief of people changed over time because I think in 1752, Bernoulli defined a theory that human beings are fundamentally rational. And a lot of our management science got created around the belief or the principle of rationality in decision making till I think the next generation of leaders came in, and there was this Nobel Prize finally validating this thought of the balance between the hard and the soft with um, the author of Thinking Fast and Slow uh, getting the Nobel Prize in 2002 and
Yeah, Daniel
defining that
Kahneman. Yeah.
Danny Kahneman and defining that human decision making is 2/3 emotional and 1/3 rational, and therefore the softer sides are perhaps even more important than the rational side. And then finally, Richard Thaler got a Nobel Prize for nudge. I mean, of course, for defining that human productivity is 2/3 emotional and 1/3 rational, and in his book Nudge.
And Prashant,
So
since many of your audience may be from India, if I may point out right in the public space without, I'm not attributing anything political in the statement I'm making. You saw how Swachh Bharat was heavily endowed with emotion and call to cleanliness and how it worked. And you're looking at the farmers who are agitating outside Delhi. How it is trying to appeal to the head. It's a very good strategy, according to some experts. And I'm not here to comment on that. But how it has totally missed the heart. And people can see this is not a criticism or a praise of Mr. Modi. It is a statement of what we see around us.
absolutely, absolutely. My next question is that we've been constantly seeing that the average life of companies has been going down consistently from 1960s, and to the extent that I read some research which said that the Fortune 500 companies in 1990 and 2015, 25 years later, had only 100 companies in common. And 400 companies did not become 600 or 1200, but most of them were out of business. Either they were acquired or they went bankrupt. I think there was an analysis done in 2004 in the centenary year of all the groups and companies in the country, and what we realized that in 100 years, if we take a decade as a unit in all the 10 units in 100 years, the only group that was consistently there in top 10 was Tata Group. The others either ceased to exist or they went out and came in, at least one group. And levers has been on a global scale, has also been consistently there for a very long time. What is the difference between companies? And your book talks of taking example from the book, where you had case studies on Vanderbilt, etc., where they said that the founder said that it's easy to build a large empire. It's very difficult to sustain it over a long term. So, what is the difference between companies or groups who sustain it over long term versus who go out of business, get acquired or merged, etc., etc.?
Rishi, you want to go there?
Yeah, I'll start with that. I think the first comment you made is absolutely right, that old companies don't seem to be very much around us anymore. Because the most valuable companies in the world today, if you look at Microsoft, if you look at Amazon, if you look at Elon Musk companies, Teslas and things like those, which are...
You failed to mention NVIDIA, which has knocked out Elon Musk now.
I know. But I'm talking about the companies that are the most valuable today. Many of them have an age which is half of Gopal and mine. They are 25 years old, 35 years old. Amazon, for example, started only in 1994. So the young companies have emerged as the biggest and the most valuable nowadays. And the reason for that is that people sitting at that time, if you look at Amazon, for example, If you look at Sears, Sears was closing down their mail order business in the same year that Amazon was starting theirs. And Sears had everything in the Amazon mix. If they had digitized their mail order stuff from paper to digitization, which was then starting to happen, then there would be a completely different story. And to my laziness, I can add a little bit of arrogance that seeps in into people who are, leaders of businesses, because they're living in that past. They are living with the glory that they had. And quantitative methods, in a way, are also a way to deceive ourselves, because what happens is that the more mathematical you get, the more engineering oriented you get, the more data is the only thing that you trust oriented you get, you continuously remain in the past. The best you can do is reach the present, because all the data that you can, hard data that you can collect, can bring you only to the present. It cannot bring you beyond that. Now, artificial intelligence is starting to look at patterns and things around data, but it is still a projective technique. It is still something that is relying on that data to give you superior forecasts than what we used to do earlier manually. So the crux of the thing is that unless you can start thinking about what is happening around us that is going to happen in the future or will be relevant in the future, only then can you make yourself to live longer. And Gopal and I believe that while human life is going to get cut off, even with medical advances, maybe at 100, the future companies, the companies today, some of them, for example, the way you see Microsoft having completely revamped himself from what it was 10 years ago, they will live 200 years. And your Fortune example that you gave, there will be another issue of Fortune saying, how did people live 200 years? How did companies live 200 years? And I think it will come, because more and more people are trying to embrace this futuristic way of thinking without being idiosyncratic. You cannot say everyone worked from the gut. No one worked from the gut. They worked with things that were happening around them. So I think that's important for us to think about as we think about the future. I'm going to shut this sun off my face.
So in the meanwhile, I can add my little comment to your insightful question. It's been a privilege for me, as you said, to have worked in Tata Group, which is 160 years old now, and Hindustan Lever, which is also coming close to a centenary now. And your question was, what makes long-living companies live long? Have I got the crux of your question?
Correct. Absolutely right.
And I cannot take examples of, I'm not disagreeing with Rishi, but I have a different point of view. I can't look at young people and say that they are very adaptive and they will also live long. Novak Djokovic may not live beyond 60. Boris Becker will definitely not live beyond. So healthy people can become unhealthy. Unhealthy people, well, it's difficult for them to become healthy. If you look at the long-lasting companies, from my personal experience, this is what I have found. That they have a very, very deep purpose. And purpose is a subject by itself. People write books on it, and Rishi can speak to that in a minute if you wish. But Tata Group said, we are not a part of the community, we exist because of the community. And Tata Group said that 120 years ago, they still say it. The language is different because English has changed. Lever started by saying, I got a lot of work ahead of me. I have to clean the teeming millions all over the world. And that was in 1890. And, well, Levers is still cleaning you in one form or another by beautifying you or taking out dirt or germs or whatever. And I think having a constant purpose which is refurbished from time to time. You may call it vision, mission, whatever you want to call it. In Hindi, I call it niyat. आपकी नियत अच्छी होनी चाहिए. सिर्फ नियम से नहीं चलता है बिजनेस, सिर्फ नीति से नहीं चलता है. Niyat, niyam and niti must all be aligned. And that is one secret they have. How do you get niti aligned? And I want to narrate a little story here, because it's not only that the founder had a great purpose. There are many companies where the founder had a great purpose, which have ceased to exist or which have lost their way. Look at IBM, for example. I mean, the vision that Tom Watson Sr. and Jr. had has somewhere become a bit diffused. I'm sure somebody will pick it up again. I'm not saying that's the end of the road for them. So I like to compare a company's life a bit like a river. Imagine the Ganga, you see it in Allahabad, it's very big and large with lots of currents and a wide bank. But the Gangotri is very small. Gangotri is very simple. And then it becomes a big river and then it goes and splits in Bengal into the delta. Now what happens is narratives build along, rituals build along, all along the way of the river. So if you go to Allahabad, you go to Banaras, you'll hear lots of stories and beliefs that people have. This is true of every river, by the way. The Nile River in Egypt, the Tigris River, Euphrates in Iraq. I've traveled here, I've heard these stories. Great companies have stories around them. The stories are perpetuated to keep the original value, or in an attempt to keep the original value, though modernized. I think that's a very important part of, Rishi and I can say that in Hindustan Lever, the amount of time spent in socializing us, getting us into the spirit of Hindustan Lever, and some people said, you fellows are like rubber stamps. You look identical to each other. But 10 years ago, when we joined as trainees, we were, chalk and cheese. The ability to infuse that culture so that one of the ways in which they did it was to make us teach at that training center. I mean, I was hardly 28, 29. So was Rishi. We are about the same age. And we were teaching people who were 22, 23 in the training center. And any leader who is trained from the beginning to have a teachable point of view really becomes very, very adept. You look at Tatas, there are lots of stories and narratives. In fact, my next book is coming on Jamshedji Tata. The stories and narratives are very rich. It's almost as rich as the Ramayana and Mahabharata, which is what has kept the culture of India alive and kicking. As Muhammad Allama Iqbal wrote, there were 4 cultures in the original days. There was the Roman culture, the Greek culture, the Mesopotamian culture, and the Indian culture. The only one that has survived is the Indian culture. Mesopotamia is gone, Pharaohic culture is gone, Greek culture is gone. Why? Because of narratives and stories. So I'm a great believer that long life companies must have a deep purpose, which is renewed from time to time, and they must have narratives and stories which are then passed on from generation to generation. So I'm a bit of a buff for that. I just thought I would add that to what Rishi commented.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. This really helps. And purpose was clearly one thing that has always differentiated Tata Group from everyone else. And now I realize and understand how over generations, over the last 160 years, the purpose has been kept alive, and it's really the stories and the narratives. Rishi, would you like to add something?
To this or something else?
To this or to anything else?
Yeah, I think this has been covered quite in quite a broad way. So let me switch to something else, which is built into some of the questions that you are doing. And that has to do with times in a business to keep it alive, to make it grow, to make it prosper. You have to play 2 different roles. One role is that of a leader. The other role is that of a manager. So I think there are times in a business or in any time, leaders have to play a management role and managers have to play leadership roles. And let me try and explain what I mean by this. If you think about leaders and managers, they at the core do the same three things. Leaders are fundamentally dealing with change, as I said earlier. So in managing change or in dealing with change, they are setting direction, the purpose and the targeted future of a company is being done. That's one job of leadership. The second job of leadership is to get alignment of people. So around the things that you want to do, how do you get the best people and how do they start thinking common themes? How do they believe common stories so that they are able to not fritter away their energies or their talents and so on. And the third is to ensure that what has been planned, what you want to do, what you want to achieve is actually getting done. Now, leaders do them, the same three things are done by both leaders and managers. So leaders are doing the setting the direction by doing transformative strategies, by setting how you are going to achieve something, the goals and so on. Managers are doing it, the same thing, setting direction, doing it more by setting budgets, making plans, which are a different way of setting direction. So if you come to implementation, leaders are doing it by motivating and inspiring people that things get done because there is a spirit, there is a culture, there is a energy, there is a drive. That is what leaders are actually seeping into their system. Managers, on the other hand, are doing IT-based control systems to ensure that things are happening. If they are not happening, then it is sort of sensitive. And what I want to add is, in that context, is that if you are not a leader and a manager, you are really not going to be successful. Because the same three things have to be done in different ways to keep a business going and to take it forward.
I like what Rishi said. I just sort of embellish it because your audience is largely Indian. You know, all of us who get to deal with enterprise have a Brahma avatar, a Shiva avatar, and a Vishnu avatar. Early in your career, Vishnu dominates. Somebody else has set it all up and you're running it. What Rishi called execution. This is no disrespect to Vishnu or to any of the Hindu pantheon, but I'm just trying to make it easy to relate to it. There's a little bit of Brahma and very little of Shiva. Okay? As you go up, there's a lot of Brahma. There's a certain amount of tough Shiva to be done. And your amount of Vishnu comes down. I think when I have talked to young people, they understand this metaphor. And that transition, when you move from being a manager to a leader, because you're not 100% manager or 100% leader, you're 70-30 or 30-70. But I'm adding a third segment to it. And when you're right at the top as a senior leader, then you're doing a lot of Brahma, but you're doing a lot of Shiva also.
Yeah.
But I think that explains exactly the same thing that Rishi answered, but I'm just giving it a little mythological twist because I bear in mind the audiences that you have.
That's really nice. That's really nice. Thanks, Rishi, for explaining the concept, and thanks, Aji, for putting it in the context. I wanted to also understand that, for next 10 years, in fact, I would acknowledge my ignorance. A few years ago, I was saying that, hey, the amount of change that we have seen as Gen X, that's huge, right? there was no internet when we started. We used to go to library and go through the index cards, figure out some information 5 days that can be now figured out in 5 minutes through Google. And a lot of other changes that happen, the air conditioning and everything else. So this the change is going to be only incremental going forward. But then came the AI, and then the generative AI, and the EVs and batteries and all of that, and then finally pandemic. And I realized my foolhardiness, and I realized that the change that the next generation is going to see is way higher than what we've seen. And what we called VUCA times were not really VUCA times, they were all quite predictable situations. But now what we are seeing is true VUCA times. So, what are the two things that you would advise leaders to do essentially to manage, sustain, and ensure that the businesses thrive in next 1 to 2 decades?
I think there is this whole thing about purpose, and purpose is a destination. Where do you want to go? If your destination is clear, or if your destination is well articulated, that allows you to merge the past and the future, because you cannot give up one and take on the other. You cannot go into an ivory tower of the academics. I'm part academic, so I do go sometimes into that tower, but less and less, because as a management consultant, I have to be out there with businesses and be practical. So in this analogical spirit that Gopal has introduced into our meeting, let me say that, driving a business is going to be very much like the way you are driving a car, but to a new destination. You are driving a car to a new destination, and what you have are two mirrors, the rear view mirror and the windshield, the front view mirror. And the rear view mirror is very important because it allows you to see what your experience has been. Because when you look at behind you, that is the wealth of your experience. And in business terminology, that could be called today's industry, today's competition, that you are actually seeing and continuing to see. But the more important thing you have to do is to look forward, is to go and maneuver yourself into that future. Some of it is unknown and some of it is known. And as you are going forward, you are knowing more and more, but it's becoming the past. You are now seeing it back in the rear view mirror. So the future part of it, you have to do, in my opinion, and in our joint opinion, as we were doing this book, is to say that there are three things. If you can get a sense of them, then you are going to be able to maneuver better. The first one is societal change. What are the things in society that are happening, that are changing, and what impact can it have on business? I'll give you two quick examples of societal change. One is post-COVID, or during COVID, but really post-COVID, working from home is a big societal change compared to how we guys used to arrive 8:15 in the morning to the office, and we had a desk and we had a secretary in the next room and so on and so forth. Completely transformed to a hybrid model of work from home and work from work space. And along with that, because of internet, there is no centrality to anything. There is no concept of a necessarily a head office has to be in Mumbai or Rotterdam or Chicago or wherever. It can be anywhere because you are able to create anything as a center. So this type of societal changes, and there are numerous of these that are happening, your ability to think through some of them and say, how does it impact my business of today? And as I react to it, what do I have to do? And that, with technological change, which is happening at a very, very fast rate, the only difference from old times and new times I see on assessing technology change is we used to always assess technology within our own industry. I'm in soaps business, so what is the technology happening there and how can soap making improve? Or if I make toothpaste or if I make computers, you thought within your industry. What is getting very important now is that proprietariness of technology is becoming available, is going away and becoming available. So internet is available to everybody, cloud storage available to everybody, AI is soon going to be available to everybody. It costs money, but it's available. So how do you take all these technologies and see which of them, your or other people's, are going to impact my business or my goal or my purpose? And as you go through that and create this continuum from the rear view to the front view, you have the ability to be able to get not get knocked down, but you will get knocked down. There are times when you will get knocked down. It is not a free ride for people, and a Gopalkrishnan Hrishikesh combination or lectures that they give is not going to protect you from failure. But when failure comes, how do you get resilient to that failure? By using the same principles of looking back, looking forward, is a way to actually prosper into the future.
That's really fantastic. That's really fantastic.
Gopal, you want
to add something?
Gopal?
I have a I was hesitating because I have a slightly tangential view. But perhaps that's to the benefit of your podcast, because if you get multiple views, your listeners can. The first thing that a leader has to do is not to get obsessed with the change. If Virat Kohli is standing at the crease, and if you could hear the commentator saying if he gets another 5 runs, he'll be a world record, he'll be a GOAT cricketer, he's bound to get tense. And the probability of his goofing up at 99 increases. In the same way, if you whip yourself up into saying technology is changing, then that itself can become a negative effect. Yes, technology is changing. That's a reality. But the tools to handle the technology are also changing rapidly. My great-grandfather could go from Tanjore to Chennai in 8 days on a bullock cart. Right? My children will go there, I don't know, on a drone or something. So the real question that leaders should be addressing is not the rate of technological change. I've seen any number of graphs which show exponential growth. So bloody what? Because the tools to cope with the change are also increasing, and it's a parallel line. The gap is constant. So it is not that complex. The moment you get simplicity out of complexity, you have a chance to address the issue. By the way, I should mention that I have a very fine book called Centuries of Change, which I would commend you strongly to read. Centuries of Change, written by an Oxford historian, where he's tracked the amount of change in human lives from 1000 AD to 2000 AD, 100-year, 10-year spans.
Yeah.
And he has found that the 17th century was the fastest changing, or the 18th century. No, so these are all perceptions. I think if I have better tools to cope with the technological change, if I don't grab the tool, of course, I'm in dead trouble. I think that is the part that Rishi was alluding to. But there's one thing that hasn't changed since Neanderthal man, and that is your area, Prashant. The human brain is about the same as it was 50,000 years ago. And that is the real challenge, in my opinion, for leaders. Because with the tools of change, with the explosion of technology, with the application of knowledge, you can deal with all of those. It's not easy. I don't want to suggest it's easy. It's very tough. But even tougher is to deal with how human beings will react.
Absolutely.
As Isaac Newton said, I can predict the movement of the stars and the sun, but I cannot predict the movement of man's mind.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
therefore, Rishi and I thought we would give a sort of, not prominence, but give an adequate weightage to this human part of change. Because while the tools to, when I began my career, I started in the computer science department. People said, I don't need computers. I've lasted perfectly well for 50 years without a computer. Today, there are executives who say, what is this AI, ML, and all this stuff? I've seen through my life. That doesn't work anymore. So you have to grab the tools that are available to you and relearn them. And you have to continue to grapple with what has been since the beginning of recorded history, the most complex part of transformation, which is dealing with the human mind. And which is square up in your area of engagement, mindset change. I don't need to say much more because you're the expert on that.
No, thank you much. Thanks for your kind words. Yeah, I mean, I am a student of engagement and the mindset change, and I shall continue to be a student. What are the two things that you think leaders should avoid going forward, which will be detrimental for them, for businesses, for people?
I think the first thing Gopal already talked about while talking about the last question or the last discussion, that you cannot get stuck with or obsessed or thrown helter and skelter because of things that are happening around you. You know, the change and around us, which you cannot avoid, and the rate of change you cannot avoid either. And that is, in fact, the bigger change. It is not so much the change that's been always with us, but the rate of change. And how to pick and choose those rates of change that are going to be relevant to your corporate purpose is very important. So the first thing I would say, in my opinion, that leaders must avoid is being jumpy, by which I mean they should not be overreactive. All over the world, especially in the country I live in, we are a very, very reactive society. You know, our CEOs take a lot of pride by being over-energetic, overreactive. They can only correct problems of the last week because this thing happened yesterday, that thing happened on Monday, how do I solve it this Monday, is the life of many leaders, many CEOs. And they are disaster. They end up in disaster. So I think if you ask me and my observations, one thing I would ask people to do is to, in a way, mentally slow down or physically slow down, to absorb rather than react. That would be my one contribution to the two that you asked. Let Gopal take the second one.
You know, Prashant, I think the first big danger is thinking I have done it and it's now set on the course. Running a business is increasingly becoming like making a sandcastle on the beach. You could have just made it and then it could have vanished in the next minute. So complacency. And complacency is aggravated by the second danger. Hubris, arrogance. Maine kiya. My predecessor couldn't do it. My successor will be very grateful for this. Even poor Jack Welch must be turning in his grave because when he was alive, he was made leader of the century. Forget about the decade. And now उसको deeply इतना deep दफना दिया कि बेचारा उठ भी नहीं सकता है. So, as our Hindu philosophy says, nothing is permanent. Your leadership is also not permanent. You walk around Chandanwadi cemetery, it's got a lot of people who thought they were indispensable. But सब भस्म हो गए. हमारा भी यही हालत होने वाला है. So, there are two things. One is the one that he mentioned, and the second is complacency and arrogance, which are two sides of the same coin. Arrogance causes you to be complacent. And my best example is my game of golf, which is terrible. Because every time I hit a good shot, I think I've cracked it. And the very next shot I'm reminded that you ain't cracked it, man. And it's the same in business. Nobody has cracked it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks a lot. So, in the end, I would like to ask you, what is your advice to young leaders to help them succeed?
This is very much up Rishi's area.
Well, I don't teach a class anymore, but I did it for a number of years, teaching young MBA students how to transition from student life to real life, to go into business. And many of them in the American context, of course, have already had some flavor of business, but at a low level, and so at operations level and so on. Extremely smart people. They would keep us all continuously on our toes. We would not be able to. If you are unprepared for a class, you are in real trouble. So the young people, we were very meek as young people. And I think one of the lessons, one of the things that young people are already doing, but they should never be meek. They should go out and express themselves, express their mind, express their opinion, because they are intrinsically smarter than the previous generation. And more the climate exists where CEOs and senior people, unless they are extremely insecure people themselves, are happy to listen. And that human side is going to grow businesses into the future, I believe. Sorry. The second, but it's the opposite thing, is that young people tend to be too much into mathematics, physics, science. I'm making a little bit of snide remark on my friend Gopal. He used to be like that. He is not like that for many, many years. But I mentioned physics because that is his core sort of training. This obsession with everything has to be factual, everything has to be quantitative, everything decision making or good decision making is aided only by quantitative methods is a danger for young people. The more you believe in that, the more you get stuck into a factory type of thinking, where something will lead to something. This fact will lead to that fact. The mathematical relationships. That is not the way life is going to go forward. Life is going to be lots and lots of colors, lots and lots of nuances. And to be able to sense that, and the spirit of how do you think society, how do you think the combination of society and technology, how do you think business systems, productivity, but imagination. I think I'm just trying to think. The scientist who said this, it was Einstein, not Newton. Einstein said that the most valuable thing for anyone is imagination. You reach things, you solve things because of imagination. So I would urge young people who have lots and lots of time ahead, unlike your two guests today, they have to thrive on imagination and fit imagination back into solutions of how do you get what you think you can achieve. Be ambitious, be thinking of the big things. Transformation never comes from Hindu rates of growth. If you want a 1%, 2% growth, you will never transform anything. Transformation only comes if you can think of something big and then take it forward. So these are the sort of advices I would give to young people.
I'll add my 2 pennies worth. Firstly, my friend has been living abroad for 30 years. Please edit out his statement, Hindu rate of growth, because it may offend Vishwa Hindu Parishad here. Just say Nehruvian rates of growth, it'll be safer. But levity aside, I broadly agree with Rishi, but there are two segments to a career. This is what I would tell young people. In the first segment, you earn your stripes by implementing the knowledge that you've acquired. And the knowledge that you've acquired comes out of your education at IIM, A or C or whatever. And the stuff that you're learning in your company from its processes, procedures, technologies, etc. And you're rewarded for this and promoted for this, for demonstrating an intelligent and diligent application of what I call cognitive knowledge. But then you enter the second part of your career, when you are rewarded not for cognitive knowledge, but for things that you had to learn by yourself. So there are two kinds of knowledge you require: knowledge that can be taught, knowledge that cannot be taught. First part of your career, knowledge that can be taught gets you the stripes. If you carry on the same trajectory, it limits you. How do you learn knowledge that cannot be taught? You have to learn it by yourself. And since I've just come back from IIM Lucknow and they asked me a similar question, I created an acronym for that. I said, first 20 years, just learn everything there is to learn cognitive knowledge. But when you're about 40, start thinking of the acronym LEARN. So they said, well, what does this stand for? I said, what do you think it stands for? So we had a little bit of a powwow. I said, L stands for listening. Likely that in the first part of your career, you will talk more than you listen, but definitely the second part of your career, that will kill you. The E stands for empathy, because you must understand what people are saying. In fact, you must listen to the song behind the words. A stands for adaptiveness. R stands for reflection. What Rishi just called slow down. This 24/7 working calls, this, that, which I see with young people, is a phase. And the N is a slight cheat on the word innovation. So there's the first part of your career when you deploy what you have learned. The second part of your career, you learn all over again, practicing LEARN. Since I just gave this answer at IIM Lucknow, it's fresh in my head, so I thought I'll share it with you.
So thank you very much. Thanks a lot. This was really, really educative for me, and I'm sure it is going to be educative for a lot of leaders and emerging leaders and youngsters in the country. And I'm sure this video is going to be used again and again by leaders in various spheres of life. One absolute last question: what would be the advice for We Matter, which is the employee engagement and well-being platform for multi-generations, using, of course, all the new technology? And as Rishi, you rightly said that, technology is going to change, and Raji, you rightly said that they're tools. And I knew nothing about the technology when I started this company, but using all the tools, we managed to navigate the journey. But coming back to my question as to what would be your advice, what should We Matter be doing to succeed?
Sorry, I didn't catch the last part. What the Message should be.
What is your advice for W.E Matter, which is our company, to succeed?
Prashant, I'm afraid I don't know much about your company, so I may not be able to really give you anything worthwhile, in terms of what you should do. And from what Gopal has been saying, you are doing so much that you probably don't need any advice from people like me.
No. That's kind of you. Now, maybe I'll reach out to you separately and first present to you what we are doing and then seek your advice. That might be more appropriate.
If you were to tell me what you do and what your vision is, what you want to achieve in the future, because what you have achieved already is worthwhile. But what are the things that you still want to do? And then are there some markers, some ways of thinking that might advance you to that goal? I'm very happy to chat with you. I don't know whether I'll be able to contribute much, but I'm happy to chat with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Aji, anything from you?
But I've got something very specific that you should do, which is futuristic. Okay. All this other stuff which you've done in the past is the past, and some of it will have a life. And I think bringing home to SMEs, startups, medium-sized companies, which are vitally important in our economy, the importance of people power is woefully lacking in our country. And, you're a practitioner, so you know this better than me. And I have been telling people that there are 3 layers of immunization that a company has, just like a human body has 3 layers of immunization. And it is through people that you can immunize a company. It is the equivalent of a COVID vax. How? There is an outer layer, a physical layer like your skin. And that is what I call employee engagement. And people say, well, what is engagement? How do you define it? How do you measure it? And you can play a role there because the ignorance about it is quite high. And once they understand how to measure it, there are well-known techniques for me, but not to everybody. So engagement is the outer layer where when you walk into an office, you go to a Sarkari office, you go to a humming office of private sector, you see the difference in the engagement level, people chatting, the energy level. If a COVID virus gets through the physical layer, it then encounters the genetic layer in the human body. So your antibodies start trying to fight it. In the same way, in a company, its culture comes up. When people fight and say, hey, I know there are a lot of things wrong with Tata, but you can't say that about Tata or Lever or whatever, How do you measure culture and how do you improve culture is something which is a very mystical thing to most people. And the third and the last layer after that, the virus has broken you, is the engagement layer, is the positivity layer, And in the positivity layer, Barbara Dickinson has done a lot of work on this. It's all available in the public domain. You should help people to understand that the positivity to negativity ratio should exceed 3. And people are going to ask, what the hell is positivity? What the hell is negativity? If you can present yourself as saying, I've got a people immunization system for you and develop a practice around it, it will take you 5-10 years to put it up, but it will be very distinctive and unique. And the knowledge, the know-how for this is in the public domain. I can give you all the references if you want. If I was 20 years younger, I might have tried that. But at my age, I will give it to a young person like you and let you take it forward.
No, thank you very much. I'm going to connect with you on that, and I'm going to pick up your brains and build this.
No, I'll give you a speech. Model. I gave a speech on this immunization of a corporation. I'll send it to you if you want at some stage.
That would be so kind. That would be so kind.
And then you do the rest of the work.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. And we learned a lot from Rishi and Aji today. And I'm sure that this will benefit the entire country and the leadership and the private sector, which will certainly benefit the economy and the GDP growth. Thanks again, Rishi and Aji, for sparing time and talking to us. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Prashant. And Rishi, I'm going to go to sleep, so we'll catch up some other time.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.